After being abandoned, I realized that nobody cares for me and that to better myself, I need to study every day and never stop learning something new, adding new aspects of character to my person. All of this makes me better every day. You know, you come to ask yourself, you start to grow, you start to grow up, if you have a family, in some cases, everybody's living their life, nobody really cares, a kid grows up like me. Well, I was abandoned. My family, got my stuff and said, you know what, get out of here. We don't want you to come back ever, you know. And so, but I imagine that there's some, I've observed other people how they live, and I know that, how would you say it, that people separate, people make their own lives, families, most people, they buy a house and they say this is going to be for my family, and we're going to, my family's going to grow and this is our house. And no, that's not what happens, that's not what happens, you go to the states and there's a sequence of life, where the kids, they grow up, they get kicked out of their house, and they go and they buy their own house, and the house never gets any bigger. You know what I'm saying? You never see a situation in which, what, a family lives, a huge family lives in one house. You never see that situation. And so what I'm saying is that when you grow up, you realize, well, I realized that, nobody cares for me. Nobody really, really cares for me. You know what I'm saying? And that in order for me to progress, and in order for me to, how would you say it, become a better person, I have to study. I have to study. I have to learn and constantly be learning to become a better person. That I can always better my best. That there's always something to learn. You know what I'm saying? And that the better person I become, the better I'm going to feel. The more, how would you say it, secure, um, etc., etc., etc. Because, like I said, at the end, nobody, what I'm saying, no, people could give you advice, and maybe some people have family that care for them, and try to best to help them, but in reality, like, you have to do it by yourself. You have to, become independent. You have to, how would you say it, um not depend on somebody else to make you feel better. You have to make yourself feel better. You have to learn, you have to study, you have to keep studying and not stop doing it. Constantly be bettering, your personality. In the States, most people think that in the United States that they're sophisticated people, you know, but that's a lie. People are stupid. People in the United States, they're very stupid. You know what I'm saying? And they're ignorant, and so, like, on their movies, they act sophisticated. They act, like, educated. But in reality, they're low lives. They're low lives. You go up and you talk to them and they're low lives. You're like, oh, you are acting sophisticated, huh? And that's very, how would you say it, pathetic. But what I'm trying to say is that you can accomplish, obtaining a character, a sophisticated character, a, how would you say it, an intelligent personality. You can obtain it. You don't have to be like these individuals where they, act sophisticated. You could actually obtain that personality, but it depends on each and every person independently to reach that type of personality, to obtain that character, you know? And, like, if you hang out with low lives and you repeat the same phrases, every day constantly, and you stop studying, well, you're never going to get there. You're never going to get there.